Hi, I'm George. Welcome to MedEV. Today, let's talk about the most crucial link in the automotive industry chain: component suppliers. There's a saying in this industry: great components make great vehicles. Europe has long been dominating this field, not just because of auto giants like Volkswagen, Mercedes-Benz, and BMW, but because of the countless component suppliers and technical service providers that form the supply chain. However, as this industry going through electrification, the traditional supply chain is facing numerous challenges. Most European component suppliers are still quite traditional, not publicly listed, not externally financed, and they prioritize sales growth, EBIT, and cash flow. But in the era of EV, their hardworking Chinese rivals are backed by venture capital firms, betting everything on electrified and smart components. At this moment, the center of automotive industry chain is wavering between China and Europe. At the beginning of 2024, several European component giants announced layoffs. They have plans to dismiss 12,000 people, Bosch to cut 1,200 jobs by the end of 2026. Valeo to fire 1,150 employees globally, Continental to let go 7,150 workers globally, and Forvia also plans to lay off about 10,000 people over the next 5 years. Why, despite facing immense pressures from the trade unions, why does this company resort to such extreme measures? Because sadly, there's really no safer way to reduce expenses. As smart EV continues to grow, traditional parts make up a small portion of the vehicle's total value. For example, in China, Bosch receives an average price reduction request from OEMs of 15%. What's more, the development of new components for electrification and smartification requires suppliers to invest a lot of capital. Due to decreased revenue and increased expenses, the profit outlook for these old auto suppliers are looking quite bleak. Meanwhile, in China, the world's largest auto market, the domestication of supply chain is in full swing because of cost and geopolitics, and this is making European component suppliers lose their market share. For instance, German suppliers' share of the global market has dropped by about 3% since 2019, with most of the loss now held by Asia competitors, mainly from China. This industry has always needed large-scale operations to turn only a small profit and has never been a lucrative one. Losing scale means losing it all. However, when the most OEMs are selling EVs at a loss, should suppliers invest more in EV business? For financially focused European companies, this poses a dilemma, so layoffs are something that must be done before this. By 2027, battery supply for European OEMs must be localized. BMW, Renault, Mercedes, Volkswagen, and the likes are urging their Chinese suppliers to at least localize the production of battery cells and positive electrode materials by the deadline. If the Chinese cannot build factories in Europe, these car makers will not be able to place battery orders anymore. That's because in August 2023, the EU issued a new regulation on battery and battery waste, which require batteries to have a passport and a small enough carbon footprint. This sets a high threshold for all batteries coming to Europe. However, localizing battery production in Europe is far from easy. Europe does not have a complete supply chain for power batteries. For example, under the strict regulations, there's almost no company that can supply the production of graphite negative electrode due to the negative environmental impact. Additionally, the EU does not allow production equipment to enter, and there's a complicated labor capital relations, all hindering Chinese battery makers from building factories in Europe. Among them, only CATL has a factory in Thüringen, Germany, which has been in operation for more than a year. Although its first batch of battery cells were produced a year ago, there's no news of mass production. Even local manufacturers like Northvolt, PowerCo, ACC have not yet begun large-scale producing. Meanwhile, Japanese and Korean battery makers have already established a functioning production line in Europe several years ago. Therefore, European companies obviously does not want to lose the most critical aspect of EV, the power battery. Last year, auto markets in Europe and China became very different. The average price in Europe is rising, and there's no obvious conflict between ICE and EVs. But in China, the average price is dropping, the price war is intensifying, and EVs are replacing ICE. If European automotive suppliers have operations in both China and Europe, they are likely to face an extremely polarized business environment. So what path will European suppliers take? Perhaps Bosch's statement can shed some light. Earlier this year, a Bosch executive said in a media interview, "We are ready for the money pit that is R&D," meaning that in emerging fields such as alternative energy and self-driving, Bosch has prepared to invest heavily, even at a loss. And this period may last 3 to 5 years or even 10 years. So where is the next center of automotive industrial chain? Europe, China, or America? That will come down to who has the best suppliers.